Hi, it's me again, Jose Segura, Coordinator of Community Schools for the Santa Maria Bonita School District. Welcome to update session number 3. So this session, we're going to talk a little bit about what happens after the information that you got in those first 2 videos, right? So video number 1 was a review of the 4 pillars of community schools. And video number 2, we talked a lot about the district strategic plan and the community schools framework and how those two marry really well with one another, that they are not competing interests, but that they actually have a lot in common and they can work together cohesively in order to support and serve our students and our families in a much broader, more inclusive way. And in this third video, we're going to talk a little bit about what happens once our grant applications go through and are approved. What are next steps? What does that look like for your particular school site? So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to screen share a short presentation as I have in the previous videos. And bada boom, bada bing. And there we go. All right, so this is session number 3. We're going to start off with our community schools. So just a reminder of what community schools are, right? They are public schools that serve grades pre-K through 12. They include community partnerships that ensure students' learning as well as whole child and family development occur. This includes integrated support services, collaborative leadership, extended learning time, along with active family and community engagement. This is a big portion of the state's overall plan for public education. And then the piece that holds all of this up are the 4 pillars of community schools. And then we talked about in our first video, integrated student supports, those things that we do for students and families during the day, the expanded and enriched learning opportunities, things we do outside the school day, and also times when we can bring what we learn in the classroom to the outside, to the real world. How are we making those real world connections? And then, of course, we have active family and community engagement, going out there and engaging with our families and the communities in which our schools exist, not waiting for them to come to us, but us actively engaging in them in the pursuit of better outcomes for our students. And then the 4th pillar is collaborative leadership and practice, the idea that we can all work together to make plans, to put them into action, to evaluate outcomes, and to decide collectively how we're going to support the students of our district. And so we saw this in the previous video. This is a matrix of the community schools framework. The framework is essentially broken up into 6 different areas. And what I've done is I've created a column for each area from the framework. And then in each column are the elements of that particular section of the framework. Today, we're going to look at section E, which is the proven practices. So these are the things that all the research tells us are necessary in order to generate successful community schools. In this column, we have community assets mapping and gap analysis. Are we really looking at what assets do we have? And are we looking at where are the gaps in our supports and services for students? What are we missing? And this is all about doing that at the street level. Next, we have the community school site coordinator, a person at a school site whose job it is to bring all these pieces together. They have lots of different names in different districts. In our district, I am referring to them as community school specialists. Then the 3rd box down is the site-based and LEA-based advisory committee. So these steering committees, one at the district level, the LEA level, that helps support the individual sites, does kind of the bigger pieces, and then a steering committee at each individual site that helps the school coordinator or the school community school specialist, school administrators, the teachers, the parents, the students work together in order to help move our students forward and to really focus on that whole child concept of education. And the last bit here is integrated and aligning with other relevant programs, right? So that is a proven practice. If we can align, integrate ourselves with other relevant programs that are either in our district or outside of our district and accessible to us, that's going to create the best outcomes for our students. So let's take a look quick at what a community school steering committee is. Talked a little bit about it in the previous slide. So what is that? Here's a brief description of what that is. It's a group that provides guidance and oversight for the development and the implementation of community schools. It's the committee's primary role is to ensure that the community schools goals and the initiative align with the needs and the priorities of that community. And when we say that community, we're talking about the individual school community, right? And in essence, like the community school steering committee acts as a bridge between the school and the community ensuring that the community schools efforts are driven by the needs and the priorities of the people it serves. So this group is very diverse. It's made up of all our individual educational partners, including parents, students, community members, teachers, classified employees, administrators, all working together, all with equal power at the table, whose responsibility it is to do their own site-based needs and assets assessment. So not relying on district level data, not relying on state level data, but doing a street level data collection of really asking some core questions, getting as much input as possible, really shooting for that 75 to 100% input from all of your community partners, and then getting a really good idea of what are the needs, what are the gaps in the supports and services that we provide to students, where are the gaps in our educational programs, or where are the gaps in our expanded learning opportunities and our integrated services. And so the site's steering committee works on that with this integrated group of educational partners all working together. Now, this is not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in a couple of weeks. This is something you build over time. The saying within community schools is go slow to go fast. And so this idea that we're moving slowly because we want to get it right. We want to build something that has a solid foundation that we can build upon once we get that initial ground floor established and really secure. And so this idea of a school steering committee built up of all these stakeholders running independently of things like school site council. And we'll talk a little bit later down the road about what the difference between the two are, but just think about this idea of a school steering committee built up of all these diverse stakeholders whose responsibility it is to really help the community school specialists at the site, that administrators, teachers, and everybody there understand what the needs are, and then develop plans and a program to move towards fulfilling those needs. Now, the other thing every school should have, every community school should have, is a community school specialist. Now, you'll see this title differently in different school districts. Sometimes it's community school coordinator. I've heard it be called a community schools manager, and so on. But what is this person? What is the community school specialist? Well, they play a really vital role in bridging the gap between the school and the communities, working to create a supportive and enriching environment for students, families, and the community. Now, we heard something similar with the steering committee, but this is really about a person whose job it is to make those one-on-one connections with the community in which the school exists. And then establishing those relationships, not retail relationships where it's, what do we get for a transaction, or it's money or time or energy, but really establishing allies within our community, those folks out there who support the work that we do as a public educational entity and want to contribute somehow to the work that's going on in our schools. All right, so that community school specialists, they play an essential role in the community. They help facilitate these partnerships, and the job can and will look different at each community school. However, the role often entails the coordinating of partnerships, assessing the needs, implementing programs that support student learning and development, while also strengthening relationships between the school and the wider community. And so even though the community school specialists may function a little bit differently at each school, there are some core tenets across all of the school sites. The community school specialist is a leader and a strategic thinker. They bring a very specific expertise to the table, and they work in tandem with the principal to guide and share community school development process, right? They're often the connected dots person between divergent programs and initiatives, bringing key stakeholders together into these collaborative conversations, and they help integrate and align the resources to support student learning. So there's a lot of words there, but all of those words mean something. And together, we're talking about a person whose job it is to really bring all these pieces together so that instead of having 5 or 6 or 7 different people at your site responsible for bits and pieces, making it very difficult for them to connect and communicate and really align their work, we're going to house it into a single person who that's their sole responsibility. They don't have additional outside responsibilities. Like they're not also a counselor, not also a wellness coach, not also a vice principal or a principal or a lead teacher or so on. They are your community school specialists, and they are essentially your chief of staff, helping to connect supports and services. They don't provide these services directly. So understand that. Their job is to piece things together. And when something is missing, when there's a need and there isn't something already in place to help fill that need, they can go out and find a partner who can help with that. And if it's something that's bigger than the school, too big for an individual school or an individual specialist to work on. That's where the district level steering committee comes in. That's where folks like me at the district level come in to help support those needs so that we can bridge those gaps between where our students are and where we want them to be. We're really where they want to be, where their families want them to be. And so these two roles, the community school specialist and the community school steering committee, these two roles work hand in hand. They work collectively with your site community. That includes your site administrative team, working together to meet the needs of our students, instead of having folks out there working in silos or individually, or just having the difficulty just keeping up with the demand on top of all their other work demands. And so two key roles, again, these are part of the community schools framework, this idea that if you follow this framework, if you live within this framework, you are going to be addressing the needs of the whole child. And so the benefits of having that steering committee and a community school specialist, we talked a little bit about this. What are some of the benefits? Well, it's that connecting families and students to services, right? It's the idea that you have these groups working together. Your community school steering committee identifying needs, your community school specialists figuring out ways to meet those needs. They help guide the steering committee, of course, this idea of coordinating district resources with the needs of the school community. District has a lot of resources. They really do. We have access to a lot of things, and sometimes folks just didn't even know they're there. And so to have that specialist at your site whose job it is to understand all the different resources that are available to our schools and how they could connect those to our students and our families, it would be just invaluable to your school site, right? They help facilitate trust and relationship building amongst school staff, families, and the community. This number 4 is so important. This idea of building trust, this of your staff, whether classified, certificated, your families, your students, your district, even your administrators at the sites, working together to build this level of trust where we all know that we're all working towards the same thing. So to kind of have that chief of staff, right, that drum major who can lead us through this, that is your community school specialist. And then help execute the district and the site strategic plan. We do have a district-wide strategic plan. It is not in competition with the community schools framework. Those two things can work collaboratively to meet the needs of the whole child. And explained a lot about this in update number 2. So if you want to go back and watch that video, you'll get a lot of information about that there. And also this idea of building teacher and administrator capacity to enhance the whole child learning and instruction. And I know those are fancy words we use all the time, this idea of building capacity, but really think about this idea of we have so much going on, right? We sometimes refer to it as the plate being full. But if we can remove things from that plate, we can move things off because they aren't necessarily a priority, or they can be managed or handled by somebody else, and then not replace it with more stuff, but be more strategic about how we access the pieces that are left on our plate. How do we bring those pieces together in order to meet the needs of our students? And at the same time, looking to meet the needs of our families and our community. That's what community schools is all about. And then this last one says facilitating data-driven inquiry, continuous improvement, and creative problem solving. All very important. This is not just things we guess, we feel, we believe, but using actual hard data collected at the street level at our individual school sites, and using that to drive continuous improvement. And this idea that we can use creative problem solving, not just the same track we usually follow or the same guide rails we usually follow, but can we be creative when we look at problem solving? And can that creativity include our community? Super important. Do our students see themselves in their education? Do they see the community in which they exist, in the school in which they live 180 days a year? And if the answer is no, then that's problematic. And so community schools can help build that community. And so since there's nobody here with me, there's no questions, but I do want to thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. What I'll do is when you see this video on YouTube, there will be links in the description to both the update session number 1 and update session number 2 videos, so you can go back and take a look at those. They are short and sweet, just like this one is. So they're a real quick view. All right. Hey, thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate it. We'll see you next time.